Hey, what's up everyone? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. This video I'm going to be sharing with you some music production tips and some sound designing tips while recreating 7 Rings by Ariana Grande. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so let's focus in on the sound that we hear at the very beginning of the song. And again, as a reminder, the goal isn't necessarily to find the patches or give you the same exact preset that the producer was using when creating the song, but more so developing the ear training so you can apply the principles that I'm sharing with you and recreate sounds that you hear from your favorite records onto your projects. It's that whole concept of, instead of just giving you the fish, let me teach you how to fish. That way you know how to get there. And all the principles that I'm sharing can be used on any DAW. So whether you're using Pro Tools, Fruity Loops, Studio One, doesn't matter. You can apply these principles and get the same results. So when listening to that sound, I'm definitely feeling, it feels like almost like a water drop in a cave. So I know I'm going to be using some reverb, but the tone itself is not very bright and it's very dull. So let's start with using a 2 oscillator synth. In this case, in Ableton Live, I'm going to use my analog here. And if I play the part using a sawtooth, it's a little too bright. So let's just start by having 1 oscillator. We're going to focus on the first oscillator. And the waveform, instead of using a sawtooth, let's try using a sine wave. And next, I'm going to make sure that I head over to the volume section and change the polyphony from 8 to mono. That way the notes won't overlap one another when they go from one note to the next. And then I'll go over here to the amp envelope, and this is where we can actually shape the tone. We can make the tail very short by decreasing the release. Or we can make it just a little bit longer. Sounds cool there. And then I'll use the filter frequency cutoff here. This is what we'll do, is we're going to go ahead and just dial that down so we can take any high end that's there that we really don't need. As you notice, when we brought the filter frequency down, the actual tone, the shape of it got shorter or sounded a little bit more decayed. And that's because the filter envelope is determining the actual shape of the tone as well, going through the filter. So let's boost up the sustain a little bit. Maybe mess with the decay. And that's cool there. Now what we're going to do is head over here to the volume section and turn on the uni. This is also in other synths that you might find it under detuning or detune. So I'm going to go over here and just crank this up a little bit, see what that does to the tone. And it gives it some character there. So now let's head over to our audio effects folder, find a reverb. We're going to insert this right on top of the synth. So now we're toggling between how long the reverb tail is going to last, and I'm going to focus in on the decay time for that. So I can adjust the decay time, and that's just the decay of the reverb tail. Now with this particular reverb in Ableton Live, I'm able to determine the actual algorithms and the quality of the output of that reverb. So I'm going to go from eco, which is less CPU intensive, and then try maybe the mid or high. Let's just start with the high quality. Immediately I'm hearing a lot more stereo width from that, so I'm going to leave that there. And then when I focus on the sound, there's also a little bit of noise of that too. So that's what gives it a little bit more of that mysterious tone to it. So I can turn on the noise oscillator here on the analog and add some white noise to that. But the noise is also being routed to the filter. So the brighter or the more I open up the filter frequency, the more the noise is going to be present. So let's bring that down, and maybe we might use the resonance to let the lower tone peek through a little bit and the noise to dial down back. All right, let's move on to the next sound, which is also layered to the one we've just created. And when I hear this, it definitely comes off as a plucky synth or plucky type of texture at the very attack of that sound. So immediately I'm thinking, let's head over from a dull sound like the sine wave and maybe something a little bit more brighter like the sawtooth. So I'm going to use the wavetable here in Ableton Live, but you can follow along with any two oscillator synth that you might have. So let's go ahead and start navigating from sine wave to the sawtooth here. And let's go ahead and see what we have. So it's a little bright, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the frequency cutoff down and the resonance up a little bit. And we're also going to use the matrix here. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign filter 1 frequency. So let's click that. And let's map that to envelope 2 so that envelope 2 will now control how, or the actual shape of when the filter will open up. So let me demonstrate that for you. So depending on how we shape this will determine how fast it opens up and then how fast it closes back to its current state. So let's lower the sustain and the decay. And that's where we get that nice pluck. So I'm going to head over to the amp envelope so that we don't hear the sound hanging over once the pluck that we've created from envelope 2. Let's go ahead and bring the amp envelope down as well. So I'm going to bring the sustain down and the release. Now let's go ahead and mess around with the decay and sustain to kind of get it to taste. Now let's turn on the sub oscillator so we have an octave lower, an oscillator playing an octave lower than. All right, now depending on where we place our filter frequency here is also going to give a nice different tone to the filter envelope. So the higher we open it up, or the lower, see, the lower we go with the filter frequency, focuses more attention on the actual pluck itself. And then you can go ahead and open up the sustain. And let's go ahead and layer it with the second oscillator. This one maybe just a little under the sawtooth and lower in volume. And I'll bring up the tone of that sub oscillator up. Now, what I'm going to do is turn the unison on, and we'll try shimmer here. And just like we did with the analog, this is the detuning. We're going to add a global detuning to the sound. And that's going to give a nice stereo depth to that as well. So let's add a reverb right on top of the wavetable, and I'll immediately just switch from the eco quality to the high, and we'll go ahead and adjust to taste. And I'm going to probably trim off some of the high input here on this reverb and maybe crank the pre-delay so we hear the original signal first, and then the reverb delay will slightly echo that, and we'll hear the reverb a little bit after. So just bring it down a little bit. And maybe just a little bit more decay time. And let's see what that sounds like with the first patch. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this track, Command D, and I'm going to have, since the same, once you duplicate it, it also carries the same MIDI notes in the programming. And I'm going to hold Option down and copy the bell riff. So I'm going to have one playing the same bell riff pattern, and then we have one with the plucks that we've just added. So for the drums, I have a drum rack loaded with some sounds from a sample pack that I've put together that you can have absolutely free. Just click the link below in the description box to download the sample pack. It's loaded with construction kits, loops, one-shots, and it's yours absolutely free. And so this drum rack is loaded with those sounds, and I'm going to focus in on the pattern. And one thing that I like to do is have I'll have a hi-hat playing a specific pattern, and then I'll duplicate that hi-hat, and we're gonna lower the pitch on that hi-hat, and that's the lowered pitch hi-hat is the one that we're gonna have for maybe the triplet or the closer subdivisions. So let me show you what I mean. So here's the drum pattern. As you can see, we have one hi-hat, and I've gone ahead and duplicated. It's the same hi-hat, but what I've done was I just went ahead and held the option button and dragged that sample to an empty cell that I have here. And I did that right next to it, and I called it low hat. And what I've done is I've clicked that low hat sample, and I've gone into the controls, and I've lowered it about 6 semitones. So I've got one regular hat, the same hat, just pitched down 6 or 7 semitones. That way, when I do the subdivisions, such as the 16th notes or 32nd note fills, we're going to use the low hi-hat for it. So it gives a new texture to the hi-hat roll. Now for that second fill here that we have, we're going to do some automation, and we're actually going to pitch bend that hi-hat as we hear in the actual song. So to do that, let's go to that low hi-hat, to that transposition section, right click and hit show automation. And there we get to view the automation. So I'm going to highlight that section, and by holding shift, that'll let me just adjust that section alone. We can go ahead and adjust it. So let's just say -12. And then what I'll do is just click the first automation point and snap it right back up. So you got that nice pitch bend happening in that hi-hat fill. It's a really cool feature, or it's a cool little thing to add, and adds a little spice to the hi-hat fills. So what I'm going to do is just copy those 2 bars and Command D to duplicate that so that it happens on every other hi-hat fill. So let's go ahead and add the 808 bassline to what we have so far. So here I have an 808 sample loaded in a simpler here in Ableton Live, and I've kind of created an instrument rack with some effects, compressors, amp simulations, and EQ and saturation. And you can download this. This is also included in the sample pack folder that I mentioned just by clicking the link below. You can also, if you don't have Ableton Live, you can use the 808 sample. Now, one thing to keep in mind when tweaking and working with 808s, when you're using an amp simulator or some type of distortion or any type of saturation that adds harmonics to it, the slightest details that you do to it will change the overall character to the 808. For instance, sometimes I'd like to crank the gain a lot in some amp simulators, so that'll give a whole nother texture to it as well. And I'm going to open up the EQ so you can hear the difference of the characteristic. So as I go to that lower octave note on the 808 bass line, having a lot of gain crank there really helps it pronounce through. If you're listening to this on your laptop, I definitely recommend probably even putting some headphones in now to hear the nuances. But the less gain we give it, it just changes the character. So what I've done is I've gone a little less, maybe brought the gain to about 3 there, and I've cranked up the dry and wet to 73. This is what it is with a little less of the dry and wet. You get the low end still, but when you give more of the amp simulator, you're adding some more harmonics, and it helps just kind of punch through in the mix. Slight compression just to add a little bit more body to it. So medium attack and a really quick release. And we're going to actually shape the tone of the 808 with this 2-band EQ. So I just have 1 and the band 8 here, just with the low pass setting. So let's go ahead and sweep that down. And I've got the sidechain compressor here. And let's go ahead and set the sidechain. Let's have the kick drum of the drum rack that we just added trigger this sidechain compression. So I'm going to go to drum rack, and inside the drum rack, let's highlight the kick. And we'll put post mixer. That way, every time the kick plays, the 808 ducks out of the way. Then I've got a saturator to just drive up the gain a little bit. So let's see what this sounds like with everybody else. I can open up the EQ for a little bit more of those harmonics to be present. And that helps especially when it goes to those lower octaves. Well, I hope this video has been helpful and you've been able to pick up a tip or two that you can use in your upcoming projects. And if you're new to this channel, I want to first welcome you and say that I've got a gift for you. The sounds that I've mentioned earlier in this video, you can download absolutely free. Just simply click the link below in the description box. You can also visit www.beatacademy.com/pack and download the sample pack filled with construction kits, loops, and one-shots and transition effects. And they're 100% royalty free, so you can use them in your projects and share that music that you're making with the rest of the world. Also, they work on any DAW. Once you download the sample pack, just unzip it and drag and drop the samples and go ahead and have fun with it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.